Hello students, I welcome you all to my Swayam course titled Comics and Graphic Novels in Indian Context. We are into the final week of our course, that is week 8, and this week is centered around studying the contemporary Indian graphic novel scene. Today's lecture, that is lecture 3, is based on Sarnath Banerjee's graphic novel, Corridor, a graphic novel. Sarnath Banerjee's Corridor was first published by Penguin India in 2004. The book is a remarkable feat in the graphic novel category and is one of the first in category to achieve massive sales and popularity. In a sense, the title aptly marks the condition of urban cityscapes as the latter interacts with the rich heritage of the Indian colonial past. Hence, the movement of the narrative between Delhi and Kolkata stands less as a matter of coincidence than a willful decision upon the author. Corridors, just as much as the arcades in the European context, are an important aspect of the larger architecture of the city and can hold memories and allow chanced confluences of people and meeting which characterizes the spirit of urban living. The artwork in the graphic novel illustrates, complement the textual narrative just as much as they remain fidel in representing the portraits of the explored places in graphic novel. Reading through the artwork will transport the reader or viewer into the actual part of a city that is highlighted in the narrative. As much of the artwork and intertextuality and paratext that has been used and multimedia references that we have discussed in the previous lecture, I have deliberately chosen to miss all those points which I have given in lecture 2 here because then it will become repetitive. The best example would be Bhrigu strolling through a Connaught Place in Delhi as he sets out on his quest to find the book he wants, and a few of the names mentioned in the drawing, such as Jain books, are actual shops, which verily creates a sense of correspondence in the reader who might at one point or the other have lived through a similar experience in the past. In a way, Banerjee's graphic novel calls for urban readership, particularly those who live or have lived in New Delhi, where the narrative majorly unfolds as well as demands a certain cultural taste, mostly Western, to understand better and appreciate the visual renderings and the background of the narrative, particularly Bhrigu's experiences. A good example of the above is seen when Bhrigu is presented holding the LP long playing record of Woody Guthrie right at the start of the narrative. There are many more examples from the entire narrative that the reader needs to look out for. So, by now it would have been very clear to you that Corridor is a story which is situated in the Delhi, and it is actually narrated by a character called Bhrigu, and Bhrigu is visiting. He's in the initial pages of the graphic novel, he's kind of visiting the Connaught Place area where Jain books, if people know Delhi and people know Connaught Place, then it's actually considered as the central Delhi or the central part of the Delhi, and referring to the bookshops like Jain books and others, or kind of bringing in the realistic images from the Connaught Place itself, makes it all the more obvious that it is going to be a city, it is going to be about the life, it is going to be about the ways how people live and thrive in Delhi, what are the ways of Delhi, how Delhi functions, what does it mean to be a Delhiite. All these questions can be seen, all these questions can be read and examined through this graphic novel. The graphic novel highlights the fragmental lives of few characters who, often by chance or some cosmic accident, come together and cross each other's path, often at one of the circles in Connaught Place. So, Connaught Place has, it is actually called that the Connaught Place has two circles, one is the inner ring and one is the outer ring. It is actually formed in that ring shape, in the circular shape, where in the inner ring you can always see a flag hoisted in the center of the inner ring, and the outer ring is actually the second part which is at the back of the inner ring, and a lot of you can see in most of the shops that are there are actually quite a lot of eateries, there are cinema halls, there are international brands, there are also national brands. So it's mainly a kind of hanging out place, as you would say in the metropolitan cities. Language, if you would talk, that it is one of the best place to spend your evening. It is one of the best places to walk around, because there's no traffic in the lanes of, there are no vehicles in the lanes of the Connaught Place. They are there on the roads, but not in the lanes where all these shops are made. It is at his place where the characters are brought into focus and get roughly introduced. Brigu, as the back cover of the book presents, is a postmodern Ibn Battuta who has a fancy in looking for gathering obscure collectibles. And it is this which brings him to Jahangir Rangunwala, who, much like a modern guru, wouldn't mind taking philosophy or punctuating the visitor with his life hacks. Rangunwala introduces the readers to characters such as Professor DVD and Digital Datta, where the former gets stoned and carries out his medical operations at night while maintaining his love for poetry and music at the same time. So you see all these kind of modernization events. There was one DVD and then Digital Datta. So all these things, the names itself are kind of symbolizing the kind of transformation we have gone through, where DVD would have become outdated and digital. It is the advent of digital technologies in some sense or the other, which have radically transformed from DVD to the emergence of other digital platforms that exist today. Digital Datta, on the other hand, is torn between getting the H-1B visa and living the Marxist ideals of using the programming knowledge to help land division in his village. Again, it is very inference to H-1B visa is also very urban, I would say. It's also very metropolitan in the sense, because this is the visa that people take for going to US, and Digital Datta being one of them in itself signifies that he belongs to upper middle class family and he yearns to go to US, United States, after availing that visa, and he has a Marxist ideal. So he is actually the person who is, in the right sense, a perfect epitome of modernity, who is kind of radical leftist, and who is called as Digital Datta in the sense that he knows what kind of inventions, and now he is very much in place, very much in sync to the time modernization times, in contrast to Professor DVD. A collage of important late 20th century figures is presented to the reader when Banerjee tries to showcase the images that run through Digital Datta's mind, which includes names as John Lennon, Alfred Hitchcock, Bruce Lee, and Chucky Berry, among others. Then the novel cuts into detailing the story of Shintu and his marital life. It is in exploring Shintu's story that Banerjee takes a bold stance to explore subjects or matters which are otherwise considered taboo. Banerjee, through the character of Shintu, addresses themes of sex, porn, masturbation, mainly through humor and sarcasm. Shintu is married to Dolly, however, he remains unhappy with his sexual marital life. Once, upon strolling through the lanes of Old Delhi, he stumbles upon Hakim Tartusi, who claims to restore the sexual health of persons by increasing their sex drive and potency. When Shintu visits the Hakim, the latter starts outright by condemning all forms of sexual practices which are non-marital, and then starts reasoning with Shintu by condemning masturbation and associating it with the latter. And finally, when it comes down to business, the Hakim coerces Shintu to buy his patented special potion oil called Sunday Ka Tel for 1,000 rupees. Shintu ends up buying the oil, although later he is discouraged to find that it is like any other oil and that he is duped. However, this awakens the realization in him, making Shintu acknowledge that sex exists only in the mind rather than basing itself on any particular product commodity. So the way in itself Digital Datta's story has ended and Shintu's story has come to limelight, this itself is an example of post-millennial graphic narrative where realities, where lives of all sorts of people are happening simultaneously. So the stories don't happen one after the other, you don't get to know the ending, the conclusion of each and every story, but all stories are presented to the reader, to the viewer all at once, once, and this is how the stories merge with each other, this is how they collide, and they are all happening at the same time without giving any linear effect or without making any comprehensive total narration, in the sense that they have a perfect beginning, middle, and end. They are all very montage like stories. They are all thrown at the reader somewhere from the middle. The readers don't know where are they coming from, the readers don't know what is the conclusion of these characters, and by the time they are thinking, they are thrown upon with the this is very much like the contemporary reality where we are facing the onslaught of hypermedia, where we are facing the onslaught of hyper information. We are just stuck with so much information, with so much happening around us all at the same time, that we are unable to actually make choices that what will come after what. Whether there is any linearity, everything is happening all at once, and the user, it is an individual that has to make a choice that in what ways do they want to identify themselves with the story, how do they relate to the story, what are their preferences, what are their choices. So they all have to adjust within this amongst this onslaught that is simultaneously, that is constantly, that is continuously happening around all sorts of users, be it the user of information, media, communication, whatever. So in this way, the stories in the graphic novel Corridor also represents, they are also an example, they are symbolic of the existing reality that is happening in front of us. Then the narrative, drawing upon the same theme, slides back into Bhrigu and his love life. Here Bhrigu remembers about Kali, a South Delhi girl that Bhrigu went out with. They soon came to love each other and started living together, defying their parental authority control. However, disruptions soon start interrupting their relationship and are further intensified when Bhrigu leaves for Kolkata. The narrative then leads the reader to experience a few of the major places in the city through the travels and visits of Bhrigu. Upon his return from Calcutta, Bhrigu and Kali relationship has almost dwindled and they eventually break up. Lamenting over his sadness, Bhrigu starts illustrating himself while letting the story continue in the form of embedded narrative. He concludes by addressing the readers at large, almost on a moral end, on the flimsy aspect of love and how it is foolish to romanticize it. Then the narrative concludes by hinting back at the characters on where they stand and how they continue to go by their ways, not realizing the futility of what they are doing. Some of the major themes of Corridor include the notion of fragmentation. The graphic novel wonderfully pieces together the fragmented lives of its characters. Just as I said, there is no proper beginning, middle or end, but they are all just picked up from somewhere and left in the middle of it. Reflecting the urban condition where every corridor and every nook and every corner of the city holds its own story, featuring the manifold narratives of its people who at times cross each other's path. Quest for meaning. One of the major themes that characterize the entire story is the search for meaning in the lives of the characters. Urban conditioning, which is overwhelmingly rush-filled and fast-paced, calls for its dweller to beget their enlightenment in whatever way possible. Bhrigu's obsession with finding rare objects and collecting them, in a sense, reflects his desire to find meaning not only in those articles. However, it is through his collection that he tries to piece together his incomplete self, where the objects become an extension of his self or identity. The bookseller Rangoonwala finds his meaning in entertaining his customers with philosophy and gossip. For Digital Datta, the meaning of his life lies in using the knowledge to help his village people, and for Shintu, it is in improving the sexual life that became his major quest in the story. Countering reality through graphic novel. One of the elements which make Corridor a breakthrough in the graphic novel's reception of Western popular culture is an Indian setting, where references abound from the West as they get assimilated in urban settings like Delhi and Kolkata. Through this intermixing, the narrative subtly addresses the historical past of these cities as they remain major colonial centers where the colonial legacy has been influential in shaping the spatial and cultural setting of both cities. The biggest and perhaps the boldest stance that Corridor makes includes the novel's bravery in addressing the subjects of love, sex, porn, and masturbation in the medium of the graphic novel, which very few contemporary fiction and literature take the courage to talk about them in the manner that Corridor does. Sarnath Banerjee's Corridor remained a breakthrough in the realm of graphic novels, both for its content and its wide popularity. The graphic novel mainly unfolds between New Delhi and Old Delhi and also shifts to Kolkata towards the end, enabling the reader to travel through them, living the uniqueness of each place. This very fact that the graphic novel moves from New Delhi to Old Delhi is also an insight how India is moving from old India to new India. And through its characters, you would find that how the middle classes in India have changed, because Sarnath Banerjee, through very minor examples, for example, that a character in the graphic novel, if he bathes himself from a Lifebuoy soap, and there is a character, his father, who always used to smell of Liril soaps, is in itself an example of working class and upper middle class people who can very much be distinguished, who can very much be differentiated from the kind of smell the people give, because one gives the smell of a Lifebuoy soap, which is considered to be a hand wash soap and was almost seen in all the middle class homes, in the family of the middle class home, for washing their hands. But Liril or any other soaps like Lux and all these soaps are considered to be some sort of, they tend to give this feeling to the upper middle class that this is something that they are going to smell nice, that they are going to look nice, that is going to enhance their beauty, that these soaps are going to enhance their beauty, while Lifebuoy is generally considered to be a germ killer soap, an antiseptic soap which should be used maybe after going to the toilet. So in this way, through very small examples, he says that India has radically shifted and now nobody talks about soaps anymore, but there are so many other kinds of aesthetics that have come into practice. But those were the times how, he talks about, as he talks about New Delhi and Old Delhi, he's also kind of reminiscing about old India, where people were so simple and there were actually traditional norms, very set patterns through which you could identify whether a person belonged to which class. But now the stories themselves have become very haphazard, the stories themselves have become very abstract, and they are not even linear. So it is very difficult to identify people from such simplicity, from the nostalgia that he is evoking of the past, that in today's world it is very difficult to kind of identify the person, to kind of identify what kind of life they are living or what they are going through in their lives, because now the reality is not what it appears, but reality has become more complex. Corridor wonderfully views the urban condition or the cityscape not just in terms of architecture, but as a collage or amalgamation of fragmented lives of the individuals, where everyone remains to share their own story. The narrative is bold in dealing with topics which are otherwise considered taboo and beautifully render them in medium of graphic novel. So another aspect of this graphic novel, because Sarnath Banerjee is very vocal and very frank in talking about taboo subjects which are related to sex, and which is also very common in India, is that most people go to hakims and all to increase their sex drive, but then they feel ashamed as if their masculinity is being questioned. So all such kinds of subdued realities which are not on the forefront, which do exist, but they are not every time exhibited. People don't want to talk about them. So all kinds of such discriminative practices are being talked about very much in open, without making the readers realize, without making the viewers realize that they are seeing something that is very blasphemous, without making the viewers feel, because all this has become, if you go and see OTT today, OTT is also something, OTT platforms, if I'm talking over the top platforms, which includes Netflix, which includes Amazon Prime, if you see even the stories there, the stories there, almost all the Indian stories that are there are very realistic, that they all include, and there is a warning that the stories include violence, very violent, they include sex, and they are not fit for children under 18. So all these kinds of disclaimers are given, and it is actually taken for granted by people, by the viewers who are seeing OTT, that a scene or the storyline will have such kind of scenes there, because this is what the reality is. This is actually, the stories are now not made, even people don't want to see moralizing or preaching stories where you kind of cover, where you kind of show flowers, as it used to happen in the 90s whenever there was a kissing scene, or whenever there was an intimate scene. But people are as much interested in seeing the intimacy, because it is part of their lives, as much as they are interested in seeing the other incidents from the character's life. So they want to see it all in the real, nothing should be hidden, and that is what the OTT as well as other forms of narration stories are also giving it to their readers, without making them feel that they are going through or they are experiencing something that is shameful about, that they should not be seeing, or there should be certain restriction, because all this is also a part of post-millennial reality. The characters concerned are caught in their quest for meaning as much as they live through the realities of love and despair, and of happiness and sadness. It is in the balancing of these emotions and living through the thick and thin that marks Corridor as one of the most important urban graphic novels. Thank you.